Most filmmakers agree that audio is 50% of any film, so this week I'm sharing some reasons why you should focus on sound, and also I'll be sharing some tips on how to get the best audio quality. Hello, my name is Simon Cade and this is DSLRguide. So while I truly believe that story is the absolute most important part of filmmaking, far more important than production value, I do think that if you do have a good idea lined up, you might as well try and make it good on a technical level too. And audiences are far better at noticing bad audio compared to they are noticing bad visuals. So buying expensive cameras, rigs and sliders is not nearly as effective at improving your production value compared to having professional audio. So the next thing is that sound has been an important part of cinema for many, many years. Next time you watch a film, just notice how many things you can hear. So let's say we had this scene of someone delivering a newspaper. Initially we might have just had a microphone set up on top of the camera and then added some music in post. But in any Hollywood film, this would not be anywhere near enough effort. So now let's go back and re-record some footsteps, some clothing rustles, obviously the sound of the newspaper going through the door. And this time we've got the microphone a lot closer, and the key is that you'll be able to hear each individual sound. So every time I put a bit more effort into the sound, I find that it just really adds a whole nother dimension. And this scene isn't really very sound heavy. If you're doing a fight scene or a dialogue scene or maybe a car chase, then sound would be even more important. I find it really helps to kind of glue everything together, and I think it's one of the biggest factors that helps audiences to forget that they're watching a film and to just get lost in the story. Sound also has lots of value creatively. How you use audio can tell you tons about a character. So even from the obvious things, like if someone leaves a room and we hear the sound of a door slam, then that obviously tells us something about how they're feeling. But also the subtle things, like if someone's driving a car, does that car sound like it's really rickety and it's falling to pieces? Or does it sound like it's brand new? And what does that say about their character? Even these small things can really go towards kind of presenting a character. And again, in Hollywood films, they'll use this all the time. So the next reason you should learn about sound design is because there are some basic effects which you can either use creatively or just to fix some audio issues. So they are EQ, reverb and compression. So let's say something went wrong on set and you ended up with dialogue that sounded really hummy like this does now. And with a basic understanding of EQ, you'll know to just scoop out the mid-range frequencies and then it will sound a lot clearer. Or maybe you want to have the sound of a club, music in a club, from outside. If you just cut off the high frequencies, then that really does sound like you're standing outside a club, or maybe a car that's got some music playing inside it where you can just hear those bassy sounds. Maybe you have an actor who speaks really quietly sometimes and then goes into really loud parts, and you just want to even those out a little bit. Well, this is what a compressor does, where it makes the loudest parts quieter and the quietest parts louder. Or maybe we downloaded some sound effects that were footsteps, but they sounded really dry, like they were recorded in a studio. Well, just adding a little bit of reverb, a little bit of echo, can really help to place them in that space. Or you might use reverb creatively. The cliche would be to have lots of reverb on an audio flashback of someone saying, "With great power comes great responsibility." So you might be thinking, well, I'm a director, I'd much rather just hire someone who knows about sound. And while that's perfectly valid, I think it's still worth knowing lots about sound and having an appreciation for sound if you are a writer or a director. Because if the writer and director don't add times when you can use sound to tell the story, then I think you're just really missing out. You know, you have to have those points in the key parts of the story where you can hear things, where the sound does tell you more about the story, or else you're just missing out on a whole nother dimension. And also, if you're a director, then working with the audio people can be really useful just for you to know a couple of words, like, you know, knowing what reverb is, knowing what a high frequency and low frequency sounds are, because it makes it a lot easier to communicate with a composer or a sound recordist or just anyone when you know just a little bit about what they're talking about. So what are my tips for anyone who wants to improve the sound in their films? Well, I think some common errors that people make are firstly not having the microphone close enough, and you lose all of those kind of low end sounds and you get lots of noise. So I think it's a lot better to have either a lavalier microphone or have a shotgun microphone on a boom pole, and that way you can get it nice and close and get a really clean, accurate sound. If your audio is cutting at the same time as your video, then it can really bring attention to those cuts. So I think it's a lot better to add a kind of fade in and fade out on each of the audio tracks, and then use room tone to cover up any silence. That way the audio is completely seamless as the video cuts around, and it really helps to make everything seem more realistic, and it's just not distracting. And the last mistake people tend to make is just missing opportunities for sound. Sound is so much more than just footsteps and gunshots. It really can be everything. And I think that if a general guide to follow would just be, if you can see it, then you should be able to hear it. And if you're like me, where you know the basics of sound design, but you definitely wouldn't call yourself an audio expert, then I would say the best thing to do is just to train your ears. Someone who has really good ears can listen to a song and straight away say, oh, the cello in the chorus there has got too much reverb and is too bassy, you know, and be able to pick out sounds from amongst music or from a film. And I think the best way to train your ears is to just practice listening to lots of music, but then also I found that recreating a song is a really good way to kind of train your ears, because you start to listen out to see, has my version got more reverb than theirs? What are the levels of each individual track? And this can teach you pretty much everything you need to know about sound design. That's what I think anyway. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully we've all gained a little bit of appreciation for sound design. And if you want to see more about sound design, then on the blog post I'll link to some more videos I've made about sound design, as well as some ones that have taught me loads about sound design. So I highly recommend you check that out. Link in the description. That's it for this week, and I'll see you next time.